Good morning. When it comes to rust, the Audi A3 8P is a relatively resistant car, but not perfect. The rusty enemy most often attacks the edges of the doors, sometimes the front fenders, the boot lid, or parts of the roof. The most susceptible to corrosion are of course models that have been repaired in an unprofessional manner after collisions. Sometimes the clear coat on the bodywork flakes off, while in the cabriolet version offered in the years 2008 to 2013, one can sometimes have reservations about the condition of the roof covering. In the interior, the top black layer usually comes off some buttons, which looks very unattractive. This is a problem typical of VAG cars of this period. The hinges of the glove compartment flap in front of the passenger can break off. In addition, the onboard computer, FIS, is faulty, but not all cars have it. The air conditioning system must be checked for operation. Compressors and sensors are faulty, and repair costs are not among the lowest. The ABS module is also failing. There is usually nothing special going on in the chassis. The suspension is usually serviced due to normal wear and tear, not because of faults. Most sources do not mention the running gear on the list of potential problems at all. It is only necessary to remember that cars with the S-Line Sport suspension, or simply the top models S3 and 3 rupees, have rather hard springs. If someone cares about greater comfort, they should take this into account. In terms of possible noises, it sometimes happens that the fuel line knocks against the chassis. It is enough to secure it properly. According to many people, the steering system could be more precise and provide more information about the road surface condition. This is not a fault, but simply typical of this type. As this generation of the Audi A3 remained in production for a full decade, various engines passed through the range. In total, there were as many as 10 different power units, some of which had additionally different power versions. The Audi A3 8B was offered in the following versions: 1.68V, 102 HP, 1.2 TFSI, 105 HP, 1.6 FSI, 115 HP, 1.4 TFSI, 150 HP, 2.0 FSI, 113, 200 HP, or 250 HP. The latter applies to the S3 model. 2.5 TFSI, 340. Let's start with the weaker naturally aspirated engines, 1.6 and 2 liters. The basic 1.68 volts is basically a sure thing. Of course, it has some typical problems, such as the durability of ignition coils, lambda probes or throttle valves, and oil consumption. But apart from that, it is a very simple and cheap unit to repair. And, unfortunately, not very dynamic, but that is a matter of expectations and requirements. The 1.6 FSI with direct fuel injection is not a better choice. Not only is there still little spark in it, but there are typical problems with carbon deposits for this type of engine. And, unfortunately, with a stretching timing chain, the 1.68 volts has a belt. The 150 horsepower 2.0 FSI engine seems to be a better option, but it will also accumulate carbon deposits. What's more, even for the weak 1.6 FSI, the manufacturer recommends using 98-octane fuel. Regular oil changes and the use of high-quality products are also important in FSI engines, and the TFSI and VR6 described below. The 1.2 and 1.4 TFSI engines belong to the older EA111 series, and therefore have a chain, not a belt, timing drive like the newer, and not used in the A3 8P, EA211 engines. However, the chain is not an advantage in this case, because it stretches quickly, but you can live with it, because the prices of the timing drive replacement kit are already quite reasonable. In addition, these engines sometimes experience increased oil consumption or uneven operation, and the head gasket may also fail. The list of typical faults here ends with problems with turbines and exhaust gas cleaning systems. According to some sources, the 1.4 engine is a slightly better choice, but in practice, if the car has been running with a given engine so far, then the biggest problems have probably already been fixed, and you need to pay attention mainly to the timing issue. The 1.8 TFSI and newer 2.0 TFSI units belong to the EA888 family, while the older 2.0 TFSI to the EA113 family. The latter are far from ideal. They have problems with, among others, the chain tensioner connecting the camshafts, with the wear of the intake shaft, with the oil pumps, with the crankcase ventilation valve, with the turbocharger, with the high-pressure pump. On top of all this, there is a tendency to excessive oil consumption. One might expect that the newer EA888 engines would be a better choice, but in practice, choosing EA888 instead of EA113 would be such a bad idea that it's sad to say so. The problem is that all EA888 engines used in the Audi A3 8P belong to the so-called General 2, in which two thin piston rings are used. As a result, oil consumption is enormous, and these engines often seize. And that's not the end of the problems, because here, for example, the timing chain stretches, oil leaks appear, and ignition coils fail. Although according to some sources, the worst are engines with codes starting with the letters CDIE, 1.8-liter CDAA, and the described Audi 2-liter EA888 engines have codes CAWB and CCZA. In practice, it's better to skip EA888 General 2 engines altogether, unless they've already been properly repaired, or you intend to do it yourself and buy such a car fully consciously. Oh, and of course, due to direct fuel injection, carbon buildup can be expected in both the EA113 and EA888 engines. The 3.2 engine is an interesting proposition not only because the A3 equipped with it looks like a regular 1.6 despite being inferior in performance only to the S3 and 3 rupees versions, but also because it is recommended in almost all sources as a durable source of power, despite a relatively large number of typical faults. These include failures of the multi-ribbed belt tensioner and problems with ignition coils, mainly in older models. There is a good chance that the faulty elements have already been replaced in the past. In cars that are used particularly hard, problems with flywheels may occur, bolted connections can break, or simply loosen. There are slightly fewer mentions of potential problems with water and oil pumps, damage to intake manifolds, radiator fans, head gaskets and coolant temperature sensors. Original black sensors break down, corrected elements are green. This remark does not necessarily apply to third-party replacements, as well as stretching timing chains and oil leaks. There used to be a problem with engines shutting down after reaching operating temperature, but a service campaign was carried out in connection with this. It should be noted that even sources that list all of the above potential problems still describe the VR6 engine as worth considering. However, the fact that this large engine has to be pulled out from under the bonnet for many service jobs remains a big problem. The last option is the 2.5 TFSI unit used in the Audi 3 rupees. If it weren't for the operating costs, it could be recommended with a clear conscience, because it is very successful. The timing chain and its tensioner may require attention, sometimes also the ignition coils. The 2.5 TFSI engine was used only in the 5-door version, Sportback, and only for 1.5 years, from March 2011 to October 2012. Although diesel engines were not as numerous in the Audi A3 8P range as petrol units during those 10 years of production, there was still plenty to choose from. Depending on the year, the following engines were available: 1.6 TDI 90 or 105 HP, 1.9 TDI 105 HP, 2.0 TDI PD 140 170 HP, 2.0 TDI CR 140 170 HP. PD means pump injectors, from the German Pumpe du Sal, while CR means common rail. It is worth remembering that most versions had particulate filters. They were always installed in 1.6 TDI and 2.0 TDI CR. Most versions of 2.0 TDI PD also had DPF. The only exception was the engine marked BKD, offered in the years 2003 to 2006. The particulate filter was also installed in the well-known 1.9 TDI, although not immediately. Until October 2005, there was no DPF in this version. Until March 2006, it was optional, and then standard. Here is another interesting fact. Filters were installed in 1.9 TDI engines marked BLS, but not in all of them. If the unit has the BLS 7GG marking, the filter was standard. If it is BLS 7GN, it means that the engine was adapted to install a filter, but the car left the factory without it. In terms of typical faults, let's start with the 1.9 TDI. Here, things are really good in this respect. The main problems concern oil leaks or damage to the EGR valves. Damage to the head gasket or valve cover gasket may occur. However, you have to be careful when buying such a car. The BXE engine has a problem with the connecting rod bearings seizing and rotating, which in extreme cases can end in the destruction of the engine. The problem may also affect the BKC and BLS engines, although it is difficult to give a clear assessment. The internet is full of long discussions of mechanics who argue about whether a given version of the 1.9 TDI has a problem with the bearings or not. However, the BJB engine definitely does not have this problem. The 1.6 TDI engines of the EA189 series replaced the 1.9 TDI units in 2009 and, importantly, are also quite recommendable. The list of potential problems and faults includes, first and foremost, the fuel-sensitive and not particularly durable injection system, fragile dual-mass flywheels, turbines, and DPF filters, mainly in city driving conditions, possibly also oil leaks from under the valve cover, the gaskets fault, or coolant. The latter fault is usually caused by a faulty water pump seal. An EGR valve failure may also occur, which unfortunately results in a replacement bill exceeding 1,000 Polish zlotys, as this valve is integrated with the exhaust gas cooler. It is worth shortening the timing belt replacement interval to a maximum of 150,000 kilometers, according to some sources, to 120,000 kilometers. The next option is the 2-liter TDI units with unit injectors belonging to the EA188 series. Here we can say outright that this is rather an average choice, apart from the 1.9 TDI BXE, basically the worst in the range of diesel engines. Here the oil pumps and unit injectors fail, and the heads crack. Any problems with lubrication quickly destroy the turbocharger. Lubrication deficiencies can also result from the dilution of engine oil. With fuel in cars with a particulate filter, it was not installed only in the 2.0 TDI-PD with the BKD code, 2003 to 2006. There are, however, models after repairs, which can be a good option, but in practice a much better option, although more expensive due to their younger age, are models with 2.0 TDI crossing EA189 engines. Here, you should pay attention mainly to the condition of the timing drive and the dual-mass flywheel. Apart from that, it is one of the more successful diesel units on the market, although not everyone will agree with this, if only due to the fact that it was the 1.6 and 2.0 TDI EA189 engines that were largely responsible for the scale of the Dieselgate scandal. The following gearboxes were used in the Audi A3 8P. 5-speed manual gearboxes standard on 1.68 volts, 1.6 and 1.9 TDI. 6-speed manual gearboxes, standard on all versions except those listed above and except 3 rupees. 6-speed Tiptronic automatic transmission, optional on 2.0 FSI. Optional on 2.0 FSI. 6-speed S-tronic double-clutch gearboxes, standard on the 3 rupees, optional on the 100. Manual gearboxes are not usually problematic, although in 6-speed gearboxes, it is worth checking whether the first 2 gears can be engaged without any problems. If not, the problem may be the synchronizers. The Tiptronic gearbox is a traditional hydrokinetic automatic, quite durable and without any major faults, provided it is periodically serviced and properly used. More risky and more sensitive to neglect are S-tronic transmissions, where, in addition to oil, clutches must also be replaced from time to time. This is especially problematic in 7-speed transmissions and weaker versions of the Audi A3 8P, where transmissions with so-called dry clutches were used, usually lasting up to 100, maybe 150,000 kilometers, depending on the method of use. The 6-speed gearbox has wet clutches, i.e. oil-cooled. They should last at least 200,000 kilometers, maybe more. The 7-speed DQ500 gearbox from the top 3 rupees also has wet clutches. Mechatronics is a common problem, although sometimes it results from an insufficient service regime. Even in a gearbox with dry clutches, the oil should be changed periodically, but few people do this. And one more thing, S-tronic gearboxes also have dual-mass flywheels, which need to be replaced from time to time, usually every 250,000 kilometers. In terms of drive transmission, there is nothing to discuss in versions with only the front axle driven. Those interested in the A3 with all-wheel drive should bear in mind that the drive does not resemble the traditional quattro that constantly transfers power to all 4 wheels. The compact Audi uses the Haldex system with an attached rear axle. Depending on the year, 2nd or 4th generation Haldexes were used. They are not excessively prone to failures. but there are cases of damage to the differential mechanism or even drive shafts in the most powerful, heavily used models. It is worth checking the system for oil leaks. Yes, the above litany looks pretty scary, but remember what I wrote at the beginning. Just because something is on the list of common faults doesn't mean it will definitely happen to you. Nevertheless, some versions are definitely worth skipping, like the 1.8 and 2.0 TFSI with EA888 engines, unless they've already undergone the aforementioned modifications. There are so many recommendable variants that even taking into account the so-so quality of the market offer, sooner or later you should find a model that meets your expectations. After that, it is up to the owner to ensure that such a car does not become a neglected junk, and many engine versions do not like such neglect. However, it is difficult to treat this as a disadvantage. And if you know of any common errors, your comments are welcome.